Welcome back to the custom shop. So we got our Chevy, we got our small block, we put a 4L80 in it, and now we need some trans control. So we're going to go with the Quick Draw trans control. We're going to use this thing right here with the minimum amount of install going with the CAN network. So we already have the kill shot on here. It has a CAN network that communicates with our Quick Draw to give us all the pertinent parameters, the TPS, the RPM, the map signal, so it can help with shift scheduling. So, you know, we got a harness, it needs to be hooked up to the battery, switch 12-volt source, the trans sub harness, the ECU, and then we'll just make some magic happen from there. So let's kind of get into it here. So welcome to Under the Hood of my Chevrolet. The important things on any fuel injection system, which you will hear me continue to say in every one of these videos, is the importance of putting the positive and negative leads on the battery directly. The reason behind that, we will get people call in and they've hooked it to the starter, they've hooked it to the alternator, they hooked it to a bus bar. All those things are wrong. And the reason is, if you have another system that discharges a certain amount of energy, that can fly back through your positive and negative leads back to your ECU and actually damage the thing. And then it gets kind of weird after that, because then we're dealing with warranty processes and how was it hooked up and is it actually damaged or is it defective or what have you not. So don't hook it to anything but the actual battery itself. The battery itself will actually absorb all that flyback energy, the transient voltages, the big spikes in voltage to help filter it out to protect this, because it uses the capacitance of the battery to do that. Like, you know, throwing a marble in a mud hole versus throwing a marble in the ocean. There's a huge different effect on how much energy is transferred there. So let's, we got to hook it up there. But over here on the other fender is where we're going to put the ECU, and I'll show you a couple fancy locations, but I want to keep my positive and negative switch 12-volt wires nice and clean in the existing bit of loom that I already put up there, just to make it nice. That way, it keeps all the wires out of the danger zone of laying on a distributor or touching a header or something funny. And actually, now that I say that, I can see that there's a wire actually touching the header from where I moved a bunch of wiring down earlier. And probably ought to fix that, but yeah, that'll be unfortunate. So we'll fix that, and I'll show you where I want to put the ECU at. So I've lost my ECU. I put it right here. Don't worry, I found it. And, you know, as we're going through this stuff, I just, I want to show all the magic. Because, we're doing these product videos for the people, for the customer, for the buyers of this stuff that actually wants to know more about how the reality of putting the thing in is. In a perfect world, would have like a special built box and all kinds of other fancy stuff. It's an old Chevy, and we're making it work, and we're showing the process. So when it comes to locating the ECU is, we already have our kill shot down here in the fender. This is nearly temporary. I got some rubber isolation bushings I want to put under here, because these things, it's like a drum skin. It does sit there and just vibrate itself to death. But see, this will be on a rubber isolation bushing. The harness is in a good spot. It's not hitting nothing. It's not kinked, nothing weird. And we got the Quick Draw, and I'm going to put it possibly right here on a slightly flatter spot. That way it still keeps it out of the way. The harness is going to lay out, and then I'll be able to kind of tidy everything up here, but still have this lovely pass-through where I put that extra piece of loom. So my weather pack connector from the previous video, this nice piece of loom that I got. This is where my positive and negative is going to go cruise across the engine bay, but I like to keep it kind of tidy. We still got to contend with the factory stuff that looks awful, but we're not rewiring the whole truck. We're just wiring in our systems here. So I think I'm going to put my ECU right here. I could put it here and elevate it more, and it would kind of like lay in there, or I could do some other fancy stuff, but I don't want to be too bulky or too much weirdness going on. That's a good spot. Keeps it tidy. Keeps it real. And the other thing you have to take into consideration is the length of where your CAN connection is. So I still have my tuning cable plugged in here because I was doing some fun stuff the other day. But there's a CAN splitter that's going to go from this connection to the CAN connection on this harness right here. And as you see, it's not really a long lead situation, but the splitter only needs to go from here to the handheld. So that whenever I'm going through the handheld and I'm setting this up later, I already have the information about the kill shot. It's already set up. It already runs. It drives, etc. Tranny doesn't shift. So I'll go into the Quick Draw through the same handheld. I can select the system I'm talking to, because it does have that, CAN identification in there. and I'll be able to talk to and program and update this ECU or this ECU, whichever one I choose. And it does communicate via CAN for the information from ECU to ECU. So that'll be good. But you got to take into consideration, how far away is this? The splitter's only so large, it's not massive. You're not going to put one ECU here and one over there and expect them to be able to touch each other. So keep them local. It works out real good. Now, let's see. Let's start laying out some harness here, because we got to lay out a minimal amount up here, figure out a good spot, nice and tidy, and then we got to get underneath the vehicle, and I'll show you guys more about the trans harness. The sub harness was laying down there in the frame rail. I just kind of piled it down there, not out of laziness, because that's just where it's going to go. I was trying to get a good idea of the routing on it, so it's clearing like shifter linkage, it's not touching the exhaust, it's not doing anything funny that's going to rub through it and make me regret it later when I'm trying to cruise down the road going to a car show in this thing, and all of a sudden I've only got second gear. GM transmissions are funny like that. If you unplug your transmission and it's just in there, this is a 4L80, it's going to have like redundantly, it's going to have like second gear, like as a safety, like a fallback. So you can, say you blow a fuse, you have a bit of wiring chafed or something like that, you could still unplug this thing and cruise it to the house on second gear. But we're putting a trans controller in, so we don't really have to worry about that. We just need to make good wiring decisions along the way, so we're not, chafing this thing through eventually and then causing ourselves a headache or shorting something out. All right, let's look at the sub harness a bit. So I didn't actually fall down. I'm on purpose laying underneath this old Chevrolet. Jack stands are kind of singing to me over here, but it is okay. It is what it is. Assessing what I got going on underneath here is pretty epic. But let's show you the harness I'm putting in. This is the transmission sub harness. This connector to go to the main harness. This right here is going to be my turbine input speed sensor. This is going to be my VSS. And this is the main plug for the trans itself. That'll control all the solenoids and the torque converter and all the different pulse width modulated things in here. So it's going to be kind of hard to get the angle, but I'll do the best I can to show you guys. And I got the other backup camera up here. Hey. So let's try to get a good angle. I'll show you where these things plug in, and we're going to kind of route it, because I got an O2 sensor down here as well. We're going to kind of route it and attach it to like the bell housing itself, like one of the ears on it, because this is a 4L80 afterwards, so it's pretty heavy duty. And it's oily, and guaranteed this thing ain't going to rust anytime soon. I can tell you that. So let's get after this. So here's a decent angle. Pro tip, if you're working on an old truck that's not hyper clean, SEMA quality show vehicle, wear some eye protection, because there's some rust under here. So this sensor right here on the 4L80, this is your VSS. There's a 40 reluctor ring inside that, spins and whatnot. And that's where we get our speed signal from for our output shaft. This guy right here is some main connector. Not too bad, not too difficult, what have you not. So they plug in pretty easy. Let me try to get this going here. There is a certain way these plugs will go in when it comes to the actual connector itself. And let me see if I could sort out which one's which here. So let's see. There's a keyway on it, this, that, and the other, and can't quite see it, but it'll only fit one way or the other. There's some retaining tabs there, so it does go this direction. Let's see here. No pluggy any. Okay, so it goes this direction. There we go. Okay, so there's a little spine right here on the back of it that lines up with this one, and it should click in quite nicely. Oh, I'm 197% wrong. Okay, so this goes on top. The little spine goes on top. Just can't see the orientation of it. That's what you do when you're working blind here. I've sacrificed my line of sight for your line of sight. So there we go. See, she clicks in. That's good. We got our VSS. We need to make sure it's labeled appropriately VSS. It plugs in here. This is a modern style connector for the GM stuff. So around mid-90s, early 2000s. If you get much older, you'll have to get an adapter. We don't offer the adapter, but not a biggie. So we'll get the rest of the wiring harness sorted in here. I'm not going to dazzle you with the details of how I'm running everything when it comes to getting it zip tied in place, but let me pan this over just a smidge. There we go. And this up here is a turbine input speed sensor. So very challenging to get an arm up in here, as you can imagine. But we'll do the best we can with what we got. I'll go ahead and get her plugged in. Oh, lost my hat. Oh, got it in my eye. Oh, good to go. Somehow I got oily doing this. But we can see here the VSS, and then we got the turbine input speed sensor up here plugged in. This is in the factory vehicles, it's kind of like a slippage indicator, so it reads the front and the back. In our system, the turbine input speed doesn't actually do any background calculations because it's not really needed for what we're doing. Now, if we get fancier or more advanced with a few things, depending on the strategy of how we're doing the transmission stuff, we may add that in to do different things for us, but there's no real need to because of our strategy and how we're doing it. But there we go, front to back. We got the turbine input speed sensor, we got the connector, and we got the VSS back there. That's all we really need to hook on this sub harness. Now we need to connect the sub harness to the main harness, tidy up some wiring, make sure it doesn't hit anything and get bound up in any linkage, any shafts, or any hot things. And also need to address at some point this nasty little gasket leak I got down here because, sometimes when you do these installs, you find other fun stuff to do later. And with this being a test vehicle, we're probably going to a few shows, might as well make it clean. Might get a chrome pan on there. I mean, that's 30 horsepower all by itself. Look at that. Gorgeous. Okay. So I got rid of the questionable jack stands I was using. It's super important to stay safe. Don't rely on your jack. I've got a few friends that didn't make it because of a lacking jack stand situation. So keep that in mind. So we got our quick draw here. We know we're going to mount it here. I might not mount it in this video because that's just, preference really. It's not really that important to what we're doing. So we're going to go ahead and kind of lay it out. This bit right here plugs into this. There's not two connectors. There's just one. That's all the business it really needs. So we got that. We know that we're going to be looking at an excess amount of wiring right here, but a lot of this goes down. So it's going to kind of go back around this other harness that I have here and intercept my sub harness behind the linkage, but I'm also going to secure it to this speedo cable that's chilling here, the factory original, and we're not going to use anymore. But that way we can make that connection, but we still got all this wiring to deal with and figure out where it's at. These positive, negative switch 12 volt, two of these wires at least are going to be running. Goodness, what kind of a knot have I made today? All right. These guys, they're going to run with the rest of this harness across the back here. So it kind of gives me an idea of what we're doing. You can see all my excess wiring. I went ahead and looped it up and zip tied it in, put it in a safe spot so they're not just, dangling around looking awkward. Hopefully you can hear this on camera. I mean, there's some lovely rain, which cooled it down from the normal 379 degrees we have here in the shop. So, but with that laid out, we also got to look at our can splitter. This right here is going to be connecting here, and then the rest of it's connecting over on that side where my handheld comes through the firewall in that body plug next to the coil. So this is looking like it's going to be pretty good length. Yeah. Let's see, we got CAN connection for the TCU, and we're going to have CAN connection for the ECU. So that's going to let us pick what path we're communicating with later. So kind of getting everything really lined out here and laid down, kind of get back in my thing here. The only thing I really have to struggle with on this, which really ain't that big of a struggle by any means, is this switch 12 volt wire. I need to find a good clean source. I may either wire in an extra relay to protect it, depending on what source I get. I can piggyback it in with the ignition key, but I don't like to share my switch 12 volt signals because you never know what kind of weird backfed interference you can get with that. So best practice on that is keep them separate. Even if you got to use that wire to trigger this switch 12 volt, that's even better than anything else. Or you can use your V main that we're using for our distributor as well, and kind of use that to trigger another switch 12 volt. Or if there's another source on the vehicle somewhere, we can use that. So we'll kind of come back to what we did with this, but not really too bad. It's still hot in here. It rained. It's still hot. So anyways, yeah, a lot of wiring management going on here. The big thing is this positive and negative is going to tie into this loom and look real nice, but it's got to figure out what to do with this little bit of excess. So I'll get the rest of this plugged in, and then that's really going to help me dictate exactly where this is going to go, because I might just put it down here somewhere to help utilize some extra. Yeah, I could put it right down here, and I would get rid of all that extra slack. And then I could actually still get my relays mounted nicely too. But yeah, plenty of opportunities under the hood of a square body, I'll tell you that. I could put a supercharger on this thing too. So, connection. Let's get down in here. Got my good hat on. Let's see if I drop it again. Yep. There we go. Got that. That's clear of everything. Looking good. Got this. That's pretty clear of everything. The connection's not too bad. It's just one big connector. Just kind of slides in there. Make sure it's locked in. Little gray thing pushed in. Good to go. Not going to vibrate loose. It's not touching nothing. It's not weird. It's behind the harness that I already have in there. So I just got to secure it. Figure out a good spot to protect it from any kind of splashing or weather stuff. It is an environmentally sealed connector, but you still don't want to sit there and just beat it up with rainwater and road debris all day either, because eventually that will get through the barrier and start to corrode your pins, and then you'll be riding around in second gear heading back to the house to figure out what happened at the car show. So, not a lot left. I mean, look, that's connected. That's connected. We need to feed some power and a switch 12 volt. We got the CAN connector in. We got to hook to the handheld and then set the programming and go for a drive. Oh, yeah. Man, I love this stuff. This is great. All right, so we kind of get everything hooked up, and I'll show you on the what's what here. We're going to be, we can select the quick draw, but let's do a fun thing first. Let's scroll over, because we're hooked up via CAN network. So if we was to go to the kill shot, we're communicating with the kill shot. Crazy, right? And then go down here to settings and then system select. I can cruise over to the quick draw. Give it a click. If I wanted this to be a permanent screen, I can just click the do not show this at next startup or what have you not again, and it won't bring me to this menu when I first start up. We can see here in the quick draw that we're reading information. So we can go ahead and cruise through the wizard here. We got a 4L80. So that's good. I about said 60. Y'all heard me. So here's a neat thing. On this setup, if you're doing it with CAN network on a kill shot, you want to make sure it's from CAN, which is the network we're using to acquire our RPM signal. If it was doing a standalone and we had the RPM signal going to the quick draw with no other throttle bodies or fuel injection tied into it, so it was running an old carburetor or something weird like that, would go to that tack in, saying that we're putting RPM signal in there. But we're getting it from CAN, from the kill shot, so no worries there. We hit the next button. My hands are still a little wet, so the screen's kind of going to act up on me. Same thing here for the TPS. We're either going to be reading from a sensor or from the CAN. We're going to be reading from CAN. VSS shift type, 1D table, whether it's a 1D, kind of like a linear table, or whether you're running like a 2D table. We're just going to be doing 1D. I'm not going to get too fancy with it. It's 8-cylinder. So that's kind of the, how it reads the RPM and interprets like what it's doing. That way RPMs are correct. Right here, it's just going to be kind of a brief over of what you've selected for your setup. This is pretty basic. Are you sure you want to save settings? Yes. Okay. Now what we'll do is we'll key it off right fast. All right. We'll key it back on. Wait for it. Cool. So we're at the quick draw. There's a couple more parameters we need to do, but that's not too bad. So it'd be like tuning, and then we'll go in here to gear setting. And this right here is going to kind of give you all the what's what of it all. We're going to scroll down. We're going to go to VSS correction. I know on this truck that, if I remember correctly, when we was first fiddling with this stuff, it was about 30%. And this is where you need to get your vehicle speed and then match it to like your GPS reading. That way, your shift scheduling, it knows exactly what the speed is. Like that way, it shifts correct. If it's, if this is too high, it'll shift really early, so it'll be like first, second, third, fourth. If it's too low, then it'll extend the shifts quite a bit. So that's something you got to kind of fiddle with a little bit to really get dialed in. Nothing crazy. We know we're reading off with 40-tooth reluctor. Our gear ratio in this old Chevrolet here is a 373. Man, that's right. 373. Right there. Save that. And yeah. So there's all this interesting stuff. You can kind of pick some scheduling points and all that whatnot. I don't really mess with it too much for the fact that, it's fine the way it is. Like we put in a pretty good base calibration. If you're doing something special, like what size is this tire? That's a 29-inch tire. So we need to put in the tire diameter too. But the stock kind of selection we got in this is pretty good as it goes. You can tweak with a few things, but it's not that big. So tire diameter, gear ratio, and the VSS correction. Those three values will get you right. If you know your tire size, if you don't know, get a tape out, or you can do a bit of basic math on your calculator, but get a tape measure out, measure the diameter of your wheel or your tire itself. Put that in. If you know your gear ratio, you might have to look it up. Some people put weird stuff in there, but this is 373. And I know VSX correction on this particular truck is about 30. 28 will probably be correct, but it's something we'll just have to adjust later. It's just verifying VSS versus GPS. And we just move it up and down until they match just right. Then you'll notice that the shift scheduling gets really, really good. So we're looking good here. Nothing crazy. That's all you really got to do on the setup of this stuff. But now that we're in here, we can see all this interesting stuff. There's a miles per hour, or there's an RPM, or what have you not. This is going to be pulling the RPMs from the actual kill shot itself, and the miles per hour will come from either GPS or it'll come from VSS. So there's all your normal stuff. The TPS is closed, so we know we don't have to zero that out. Not a big deal, but it does get its 0 point from the kill shot, which we've already previously set up in another video. But now we want to go and we want to look at the kill shot, because that's what we want to display every time we turn this vehicle on. I'll walk you through that real quick. So we hit the boxes up at the corner. We hit settings, system select. We're going to scroll over until we see our kill shot right there. We're going to select do not show this again at next startup. That means it'll skip this whole screen and just jump right into this. So now this kill shot is telling RTCU some values it's requesting, and it's taking the information it's getting from the transmission we have. It's going to complete its scheduling process, and it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 overdrive. The only other thing you could really hook up is the brake switch, which as you're slowing down through the gears and you hit the brakes, it'll disable the torque converter. We haven't hooked it up on this one. It drives fine without it, but if you really want that expert level install, I would hook that thing up too. It's just 12 volts to it. That way it knows you hit the brake lights. Not a big deal. But yeah, that unlocks the torque converter when you're slowing down. Because these ones, they will, it'll lock up the converter in like third and fourth gear, and you can kind of mess with those parameters too. And you can do a little bit in the tuning software as well, but you can stick to the handheld because it's going to have everything you really need to, get the transmission the way you really want. So I hope this is helpful. I mean, I've had a good time. We've hooked up positive and negative, switched 12 volt. We plugged in a transmission. We mounted the ECU actually on the inner fender in front of the windshield washer bottle, which I'm surprised this truck even has still, because, those things just crumble. But we mounted it in there. I don't have the rubber isolation bushings yet, so they're there where I want them to be. I got to put the bushings on there to help the ECU live even longer. The less vibrations and heat you can put into an ECU, the longer the thing's going to last. I've never had one failed hard mounting it, but I also don't want to tempt fate, so I want these things to last as long as possible. I hope this has been a helpful and informative thing. The next thing we need to do is when the rain lets up, we got to move some cars out the way and go give this thing a drive. But hope that helps.